Welcome to the show. Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast, episode 44.
44.
Oh, Hank Aaron.
Oh, Hank. Oh, Hank.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you notice Joy and I are sitting on opposite ends of the table, not because I did something to make her upset in the car. That happened at home, but...
Okay. I wouldn't be in the room with your ass if that was the case.
Yes, you would, because you love me. Black love.
All right.
Generational wealth. What other catchphrase?
Somebody gotta watch the kids.
I don't know.
somebody got to watch these kids.
Can't do no better.
Basically.
We stuck
All
together.
the above.
So we go with.
But no, the distance between us today is because we had to bring in two special guests, two people from the greatest high school there is, ever was, ever will be. Whitney, young man in high school. Two of the most successful black people that I know that are married to each other. And they live 2 blocks from the studio, and we're available today. So,
It's really the proximity.
yeah.
Can we qualify that? We're two of the most successful people that you know that are married to each other.
they'll live 2 blocks from here.
We're
All of those.
all
of that.
So
It's-
we're not two successful people. Period.
But you know what? Because we also know their neighbors, so that is.
I'm just trying to place myself.
No, if you go most successful, definitely not. If you go, they'll live 2 blocks from us, but all above,
All right.
plus Whitney Young, absolutely.
One of those circles, the Venn diagram with like that little sliver.
Absolutely.
Almond shape. Gotcha. All right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have the CEO and co-founder of Piggyback, Mr. El-Amin, and his beautiful wife, Camille El-Amin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Hey.
This is my first podcast, so I don't know what I'm supposed to
If I
talk.
want to be introducing her beautiful husband, is it like, can we cut and then have you say that again?
It would have to be true, though, so we got to,
I was like, is he serious?
yeah, we would have to work on that again. Nothing but I ain't going to hurt nobody. The truth ain't going to hurt nobody on this podcast. Hence how we got to the name. But one of the reasons we wanted Ish and Camille to come today, Joy and I, as most of you know, we moved to the Beverly area here in Chicago. It's been 3 years this month, actually. But along the way, I reconnected with Ish, and not only beyond like talking me through different neighborhoods and kind of real estate strategies, which was very, very helpful. I never really said thank you, so I probably should today, but we'll see how the episode goes. But we talked a lot about CPS, selective enrollment, and that process and how to think about things. And that's been one of our most well-received episodes. And apparently, Joe, we've helped dozens of families help make important decisions to help propel their life. So who better to have on the show to do CPS, selective enrollment part than Ish and Camille, because they've lived this process before us and kind of really set a path and dropped a lot of jewels on us to help us with our process. So why not have them come and join us this time around?
Yeah, makes
Happy
sense.
to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who don't know, combined we have 6 kids total that are about 10 feet away from us.
Damn.
And it's so quiet. You don't hear anything.
You don't hear anything. That's how good the
that a good
sound.
thing?
Yeah, that's how good the sound quality is at Lavardigan Studios.
Yes,
located
quality,
in beautiful
soundproofing.
Beverly, off 105th and Western, next to Mr. Submarine. But so the first episode, we really broke down the CPS selective enrollment process and kind of broke down like why it exists and how the neighborhood tiers come into play, how your child score, and then really what's the importance of the selective enrollment schools versus kind of the schools you're automatically placed in based on your neighborhood and geography. We find ourselves probably about 4 or 5 years removed from our initial entry of our son going into CPS, going into selective enrollment. Our daughter Bella successfully got into a CPS selective enrollment school. But now we're at this unique crossroads, right? Because we see that there's votes being put in place by the city, the administration, that could potentially remove selective enrollment schools, even though they said that's not going to happen. We also find ourselves in a place where our kids are older and we're now making more choices. And we also find ourselves in a place now where real estate decisions matter a lot, especially as we start to get to high school, because the choices for selective enrollment high schools are fewer than elementary schools. So you just find yourself in this unique position where you have to start making decisions. So I'll start with you, Camille. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Let's start from the beginning. As a proud Whitney Young alum, just talk about that process and the decision for you to go to CPS Selective Enrollment School.
Well, I'll say that it started before Whitney Young. I went to a selective enrollment elementary school. Are we saying names? Is that okay?
If you want,
Okay.
you can do whatever you want.
So, born and raised in Chicago on the South Side, I went to McDade Classical for elementary school.
Okay.
And it was a small school many years ago. I'm assuming it's a small school still now, but it only went up to 6th grade. So when I was approaching 5th, 6th grade, my mother, who is also an educator, kind of subtly told me about the importance of a test that I was going to have to take, and that I needed to do well, but it wasn't a pressure situation, but it was just a test that I would need to take to go to the next school. So I needed to get a certain score. I needed to do well in school, and I was going to take this test. Thankfully, I did well on the test, and I went to Whitney Young in their academic center. So I've been at Whitney Young from 7th grade all the way through 12th grade. So that's one unique thing about selective enrollment schools. When you get to high school, or actually middle school, there's a little bit of a crossroads, because some of the selective enrollment schools go all the way to 8th grade, some just go through 6th. And even the ones that do go through 8th grade, you can still make that decision to switch for junior high if you feel like you're ready to do so. But in terms of Whitney Young, I have 2 older sisters. They went to Whitney Young. So that's pretty much where I was going to go.
The path had been set. So let's talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, a little bit different for myself. My mom, she ran a private school until I was in 5th grade, and I went there with her. And then I also joined a gifted regional center, Keller, which was up to 6th grade at the time. Now they're up to 8th grade. And testing into that school, experiencing what an advanced curriculum felt like, was the first time I felt challenged, and I was like, okay, this is something I really want to get into. So I spent 1 year there, then tested into Morgan Park selective enrollment for junior high. I wanted to stay at Morgan Park. It was amazing. I was in there with high school people. It was a lot of fly, attractive girls. Oh my God, so many women.
Tell me more.
The important thing.
Just like they had these pom-pom and like cheerleaders and these little orange. And my mom was like, we want you to test for Whitney Young. And I was like, I don't want to go to Whitney Young. I want to stay here with the fly honeys. One of these is going to be my wife. So I took the test, and I didn't make it. So I didn't do well enough for Whitney Young. And I was like, yes, I get to stay with the Mustangs. My mom, being the educator that she is, she went to the school. She said, give me your math department, the head of your math department. She went to the head of the math department. She said, give him any test. And he's like, what are you talking about? She's like, give him any test. He pulled out some papers. I did the work. She was like, he can do any math. And they adjusted. We're not going to air this, right?
It might be principal discretion. They have a thing.
Principal
Yeah, they do.
discretion. Yes,
Principal
principal
So
discretion.
I got into Whitney Young.
Okay, Ishwill Hunting over there. Just look at the
Met
chalkboard and just
met
solve
this
the
lady,
problem.
and then, banged out 4 kids.
It was a longer timeline, but heading to the chase.
But yeah, just knowing, I think both of us having educator parents, knowing the system could work for those that knew how to work the system. My mother was a gifted teacher. She knew how to teach towards the test. This was before you could just go online and find, cheat codes and what do they need to study, types of currency, all these different things. My parent was one of the ones that was administrating these tutoring sessions to the students trying to get in. So she had a hand up, and she also knew her students, knew her children, and knew what our strengths were. So as parents now, we're trying to still take advantage of her mother, my mother, and find out what are our kids' strengths before they get into the test. Are they classical? Are they gifted? Should we push them more in this? Should we allow them to read these graphic novels? Should we push on the math? Should we ease up on, history, anything like that? We listen to our parents because we know that they've been educators for us for our whole lives.
And I'll say one more thing about our foundation in terms of selective enrollment. Both of our mothers, as we said, are educators, and they were not on opposite sides of the spectrum, but his mother worked at a selective enrollment school, whereas my mother worked at a neighborhood school. So I think they got different perspectives, right? So maybe my mother saw the types of resources that the neighborhood high school had that she worked at, and she eventually was a principal of that school. But still, you're limited to the amount of resources. You try to do the best that you can with the community and the students that you are afforded, right? That are just in that community. So knowing that and knowing the community that we lived in and knowing what her children's potential was, I think it was important for my parents to have all of us test for selective enrollment.
I think it's interesting because I feel like I was one of the people, I came from a small 8th grade class. There were 6 of us total in my 8th grade class. And then I came to Whitney Young. There's over 500 people. And one of the things my entire life, straight A's, and I was always, the smart kid, or we were all like the smartest kids and we thought we were gifted. There's nothing like being punched in the face your first semester of high school by realizing you're mediocre at best. I think I graduated bottom half of the class with a 3.1 GPA, and it just helped set the tone, let me know, hey, there's some bad mofos out in this world. And for me, I didn't have to deal with that as an adult, or once I got to college, I got humbled right away. Learned I wasn't the fastest, strongest, definitely not the smartest. It's kind of prevailed to this day, but it's one of those things that you talk about being challenged. I feel like what I learned there more than anything is how to be I don't want to say the underdog, but be a person that there's a challenge ahead of you. You need to find a way to figure out stuff. Yeah. Less about can you master this. It's more how do I figure out how I can just stay in the race. And I feel that actually has helped me in my professional life and being able to adapt to whatever situation I've been thrown in.
There's a book called Grit that I was introduced to in one of the accelerators for startup businesses. And as you're reading through Grit, it's all of these tales of overcoming obstacles and how do you find a way to do this. And as I'm reading it, I'm kind of like, this just sounds like a day in the life. This is things that we've done and not even knowing that there was a title to it. So what you just described, being thrown into a group of, we had 410 in the class at Whitney Young. A lot of those people are smart. A lot of those people are going on to get PhDs and to be professors and to write books and, be at the top of the academic food chain. It's I just came here to be cool. I wasn't trying to make any of those ranks, but now you're sitting next to them and you're drawing from them, you're drawing experiences from them. They're your peers now, you can lean on them. And I think that makes the network of parents and the network of graduates and alum, that makes that a little more stronger. I rep my high school a lot more than my college. When I'm out, airport, overseas, anywhere, I'll tell people I went to Whitney Young.
Where'd you go to college? Watch your toes, everybody. Where'd you go to college at?
Princeton University. Another adjustment, going from top 10 rank at Whitney Young to Princeton gives zero shits what you did in high school.
You can curse. We're past the 3-minute mark.
She cracked the seal. So
it's supposed to wait 3 minutes according to YouTube algorithm.
My kids are watching this. Don't you say these motherfucking words. But that cold water to the face. It's nah, this is gonna be difficult. You know, this is gonna be an adjustment. But making my way through engineering, playing football at this Ivy League school, which I know nothing about, coming from a public league inner city school, that prepared me to do anything. Making it out of there in 4 years, some people don't. Some people don't make it out at all. So making it out of there in 4 years, when I read this book, Grit, of how to overcome the smallest little of hurdles, it's I've done all of that. And I just didn't know it had a name.
It makes sense. So, Joy, you got to hear 10 minutes of Whitney Young alum wax poetic.
I'm so sorry.
That's all I'm going to hear. I just was I'll just sit here. I was I'm used to this.
No. But I wanted to circle back to you as a CPS, as CPS employee now, but someone who's been in the classroom for 15 years. Can you talk a little bit just about, when you came to Chicago, kind of your shock on, I guess, the rigor put into the process to get into one of these schools?
For my high school, I did also have to test in. So I thought it was similar, but I didn't realize it was kind of like a disparaging nature in regards to neighborhood school. It's I feel like that to me is the biggest kind of difference is that like some people literally don't have any option. So there's more pressure put on students here to me to like do well on the test because their neighborhood option is like, yes, I'm from Milwaukee. That's where I'm from.
Fine
I'm from
American
the
city.
whatever.
Fine American city.
Yeah, I mean,
Fine American city.
So yeah, it does its due diligence, but I would say that primarily like the difference is like our high schools weren't like. I feel like there's such a big difference between selective enrollment and like the neighborhood high school options for people on the South and West Side. Just from being a teacher for 15 years, working here, it's like shocking how big of a difference it is.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think that would be the main thing that I noticed.
But a key thing that you said is a difference in neighborhood schools on the South and West Side.
Right.
If you live on
Primarily.
the North Side, if you live in a different type of community, it might not be an issue.
It's not even you can go to your neighborhood school.
You're fine sending your kid to Saginaw. You're fine with that. And I think, yeah.
And there's something I found out as a parent that I'm not even a parent yet. We hadn't had kids. We just moved to Beverly, and there's a knock on the door. We didn't have children yet, but the local school was sending around their LSC, knocking on residents' doors and letting them know you have a voice to put this principal out. We don't like this principal. Will you help us replace this principal? I was 28, 30 years old. And I didn't know that was something we had the ability to do. I thought all we do is sit back and complain as Chicago residents.
Oh, wow.
Schools are this, schools are that. But there's actually a voice that we have to be part of the principal selection, the budget, as well as rating the school's academic status. And that's what the local school council does. It's special to Chicago. It's related to sort of the unions and stuff like that. In the 80s, they came together and they were just like, school board shouldn't be the only thing governing these schools. There should be this collection of parents, the principal, as well as teachers.
And students
and students for the high schools. And learning about that, I became interested even before we had children. So once we had our oldest child, I joined the LSC of her school. And being a part of that process, instead of sitting back and saying, whatever comes to us. Being a part of the LSC, I was the chair for 2 years. You learn about what other schools' LSCs are going through. It's crazy.
Tell some stories. Let us get some stories.
So my first day at our LSC, this is a selective enrollment school.
On the North Side.
On the North Side. The teacher, the parents, they come down. I'm just a visitor. I'm just outside, a guest. They talked for the first 10 minutes about how the Target, which has a Starbucks, how the coffee at that Starbucks is just not the best. This was the first 10 minutes of the meeting. I've got my pen out. I'm like, what's the important issue that we're going to learn about? Let's fix everything.
Problems, man.
Charge the coffee at Starbucks and who serves the best. And it's like, I don't have no stabbings. Like, it's no scandal to hide. Like, nothing to talk about. Some schools, they run like fine oil machines. And it's such a disparity because you could go 2 miles to the west, a mile south, that same neighborhood where they can't fill positions. They can't get the budget for the simplest of things. I remember during the strike, there were schools that weren't having their custodians take out the garbage. So there's rodents and rats and everything in the kids' cafeterias. And I'm dialing into these calls like, I got nothing to report. Like, we got it good.
And don't even talk about the pandemic, all the technology that was and the fact that schools, like people on the South and West Side, did not have Wi-Fi at all. And it's just like a lot, like the LSC too is like they show the budget for the school as well. So if you're involved, like you can be involved in how the money is spent, like where the money is going. But a lot of people just don't know about it or think they can be a part of it, like you said.
Everyone gets a vote. You can run as a parent or as a community representative. And the most important thing, if you don't like your principal, you have a say directly in extending their contract. Most people don't know that.
No, that's interesting. You know, I think also is interesting when we were, I think this went away probably 2 years ago. Schools had a rating, like, right? It was a 1+1, 2+2, and then 3. I think at 3 you were like considered a turnaround school, or you're at that level. Yeah. Now that's gone away. Like, there's no real way to, as a parent, to like have some type of objective measure to find out what school is going to best serve your needs and serve your children. So as we look at where we're at now, like, what are the tools that we should be thinking about or leveraging to like make the best school choices for our kids, if public school is going to be that route?
Your community, absolutely. When we had our first child and we were researching schools, we did exactly that. We were looking at those ratings because we were, 30 plus years removed from starting kindergarten.
Yeah.
So we looked at all the ratings. We needed to figure out how we were going to pick the schools, how to rank them. We knew just from our experience and where we went and where our friends went, what the South Side classical schools or gifted schools were, but we didn't want to restrict ourselves just to our neighborhood. So we looked at those ratings. Now that we don't have those ratings anymore, we really are branching out to our community, right? So
when you say community, can you define that for me?
Yeah, so friends, other parents, family members, we are in a special position because we do have a lot of educators in our family. So we rely on them heavily to learn about the landscape. And we're also involved parents. So as Ish already mentioned, he was on the LSC. So he's in there talking with administration. So when it was time for our second child to go to selective enrollment, he already had some inside knowledge of what schools were increasing in rank, which schools were decreasing in rank, and things like that. And then once you do get into a school, become friends with the parents, right? So you can find out, do they have older kids? Do you have, what was your experience with your older children? Or do you have neighbors? So for us also, the neighbors, when we first moved into Beverly, our neighbors across the street have a daughter who's maybe 3 or 4 years older than our oldest daughter. So both the husband and the wife, were helpful in us learning about preschools. Their daughter went to Keller, so we had also additional knowledge about current Keller administration and what the school atmosphere was like. We also have older siblings who have children, so relying on them as well helped out a lot.
Yeah, and she touched on it a bit. It doesn't start in grade school, like the daycares. It does. The preschool it's a joke, but like
it's true.
If you land in the right preschool and it fits financially and geographically, that could be your start to having them test into the right kindergarten or first grade, depending on the school. And we had that preschool. It was Beverly based. We got both of our older girls in there. They were able to test into selective enrollment.
They had a gifted prep program at the preschool.
They geared directly towards this kindergarten test. And a lot of parents, they swore by it. Our neighbors swore by it. So we followed that track. That school was bought out.
Oh, we know. We know.
So it threw a lot of people who had eyed the Beverly area and knew that this was a formula that you could use. So had a lot of people panic. A lot of people that's like, hey, I'm paying these property taxes. Where's my preschool?
What we gonna do?
So I think
because we had 2 more kids. Well, we still have 2 more kids.
Yeah, she had 2 more kids
by myself.
So knowing that was going to be a curveball, now we're juggling the older 2 going through their first and third grade, and now we have to take our son, who had already done 1 year at this preschool that was stellar, and pull him out and figure out what are we going to do for him. And boys are different. Educating boys are different. So we put a lot of focus into that and ended up sending him to private school for the last 2 years of his preschool. Hurt the pockets, but we got the results.
You got it.
And he got his test, and he was able to get into one of the good regional gifted centers. So it's knowing that you don't know everything. I think that's key. I'm a very stubborn person. I think, hey, look, this is the way to do it. It works. We don't have time to do anything else. I have to sit back and say, hey, look, I've got to take advice from everybody. I've got to talk to other parents that are going through this, find different opinions, actually listen to my wife for once, our parents, our siblings, and just be open-minded, because at the end of the day, we don't control where those results are going to send that child, if they're going to send them anywhere. It's possible we don't get any matches. So for those that are control freaks, sorry.
Yeah. I think, oh, no, it's okay. I think the other thing, too, just to build off of community, is like data, because a lot of people will just kind of go with what the crowd is saying. It's a lot of, I think it's important to have community, but two, plus your community, you should be able to back up what they're saying with evidence. And if you can't back it up with evidence and data, then I feel like you should really have an objective look on that decision, because that decision, it may impact you, but it does impact your child, and you want to like have the best situation for your child. There's a lot of like websites, Illinois School Report Card, School Digger, like go on the websites. Don't just be like, oh, because 5 of my friends said this is the best school, this is where I'm going to send my kid. Like, but is it the best school though? Like, what is the data? What is the evidence? So that you know, like, you're making the most informed decision. You've talked to people, you researched it. I think that is also important. Even though CPS doesn't have the ranking system, I just still think, like, what are the test results? Asking them, when you go to the schools, ask them how many kids did get into academic centers at your school. Like, ask, because it's really about, like, the long game. And if they're not getting kids into the academic centers, it's like, what is your objective here? Like, what are you trying to get when you're putting your kid in that school?
Definitely.
And one step beyond, are they getting into the academic center? How are they doing?
Right, yeah. Are
Once
they
they get
staying?
there, yes.
Kids get in and they don't stay.
Exactly. So that was another advantage we had. My mom was teaching at Whitney Young for science. She was the chair of the science department for a while. She was the academic center science department. So she knew, oh yeah, if she gets into that school, those kids do really well in science. She could speak to what type of program these feeder schools were doing. If there was a school she didn't know about, she was able to talk to other teachers at other schools and get a rating where it doesn't exist. The 1+ doesn't exist anymore. She's able to say those kids come out very, ready to go. They're prepared. They know how to write. They know their math. So we're getting the inside scoop from the next level of how that school is putting them out. And that goes a lot with us. The other thing is knowing your child. Our 4 children are all 4 different personalities. So we know what works for one. We've got to treat the other one a little bit different. The strengths, the weaknesses, and things like that. So if you're just listening to those 5 parents, do they have a child that matches your child's profile is another important thing.
That's true.
Yeah. I think what's interesting when I think about like the selective enrollment process and having, being fortunate to have my kids in both. Somebody asked me what makes not even selective enrollment versus neighborhood or magnet, but what makes a school a good school? And I feel for me, we can say community. I say how involved are the parents?
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's parents.
Like you take anything else away, you strip everything away. You could talk about resources, you could talk about access. How involved are the parents? Because if the parents are involved, you're gonna go through hell and high water to make sure your kid is in class, right? So you look at the attendance rate. If you're below a 95, 96, you're that's saying something right there. If your attendance rate is there, and then you start to look at things. Obviously, neighborhood means one thing, but then if you have parents, you have what's that? That's when that whole community comes in, because they want to make sure the students that are at that school are really protected, because that's a staple of the neighborhood. I think what is also interesting, when Joy and I were looking at houses, you could see property values climb based on the desirability of a neighborhood school. Yeah. And I think, the correlation between access to education and real estate prices and then property taxes it's kind of amazing what it is. And I think that's one of the discouraging parts about Chicago, because you do have a lot of places on the south side. I'll call it Bronzeville, Kenwood High Park, where you're paying healthy taxes, but then your access to guaranteed to a guaranteed school that's going to challenge your children are not there. And I think that's like interesting. As you think about all the dynamics that go into like making a selection for your school, then the financial implications, because if you don't get into the school you want and you have a child that's not ready to go into a school, or call it the parent where the community is less engaged, that's going to set you back financially. You're taking out loans, or you're hoping that you're going to be able to come up with this extra 13 to 20 grand a year to send your kid to this private school, or somebody can pick them up, or you're doing all these things just to get by. And it's like a lot of implications if your child does not get into this school.
Right.
And without this information, it's how do you make a good choice?
I think too, like that's kind of where the private school I think sometimes with parents, it's like, what do you really want to do? How strong do you want like your voice to be? Because if you put your child in a private school, like they have a lot of say, more than you would at a public school. Not saying I'm for the private school, but it's just, it is what it is. So it's like, a lot of times it's like, what do you want as a parent? What is best for your child? What will be your commute? Will you be able to get them there on time? Like our son, for instance, he goes to Keller. It starts at 7:30. We just found out he was having a hard time getting settled in every morning. Because we get him there at like 7:30 on the dot, or like 7:34 sometimes.
I get him there at 7:20. I didn't know about all this.
I have no knowledge of this.
Learning something on this podcast today. Huh? 7:20 at the
But
latest
anyways,
for me.
Stay in your corner.
Okay, you're right. But anyways, the point is like, are you going to want to get up at 7? Are you going to want to get up at 6:30 to get your kid there? Like, because these are the sacrifices like you have to make like every day. Like in order for him to get settled, he has to get there early. That
Because
means I got to get up earlier.
Because there's no buses anymore.
There's none.
Yeah,
None.
And then some schools cut their after school program by an hour, but still charge
But you
the same
still pay
amount.
the same amount.
You pay the same amount for an hour less service.
Yeah, I think the CPS that we're looking at now versus 5 years ago is completely different. And a lot of it was a result of COVID, with some of the money from COVID not making it into these later years. But some of it just wasn't sustainable. The bus of today was not the bus that we knew.
That's true.
Growing up in the 80s and the 90s, and the prices just don't make sense. And now they have to transport special needs kids, physical, mental special needs kids, but they don't have to transport those that are within the ranges. And we just tested our 5-year-old. First time they've told us after the test, just as a reminder, there is no guaranteed bus.
Absolutely.
So make your selection, assuming you're going to be the one
Transporting them around.
Exactly. Driving them there, getting them there at 7:29 and a half. And hopefully it works out with your schedule. Yep.
So true.
I think what's also interesting with the removal, it's how they did the removal of buses. Like decisions were made and then they were taken away, and there was nothing. The first time around, this happened because of COVID. They subsidized you with a healthy $500 a month per child.
That wasn't sustainable.
That's not sustainable. We all know that. They still could have did like $200 a child. They could have did something.
Put in on my Aldi.
Do something. But instead, they offered reduced fare bus cards for our 5-year-olds, which is kind of insulting.
And bless their heart, I don't know a single family that's going to say, we've got this bus card. Let me, the adult, get on this bus, take this child to school, and then start my day. I'm so thankful that they gave me this bus.
But some people, but that might be some people's only option though.
Yeah.
So just putting that out there. And we were never in the range to do
When's the last time
busing.
you took a bus?
I took a bus
To Navy.
probably
Years.
To go to a gala? Because
I think it's been within the last.
What
I
color?
have a blue one. A hard blue one. Yes. Boo boo. Yes.
This is us.
Yeah. I normally take the train if I'm on. Coley has seen me on the train.
I be slumming. Yeah, I be on the train.
Metro?
No, he's seen me on the red line.
Y'all take the red line?
We did. No cap.
on the red line.
No cap.
So, I'm not on the bus as
Okay.
frequently, but I do take public transportation
That train was tough.
every so often. So
Still smell like pee-pee?
it does. It does. Very much
But
so.
it's mixed with weed now to help
Yeah,
diffuse
weed
it
is-
now.
yes. Yes.
That's Chicago.
Chi-town.
Chicago, my city.
Yes. But our children, the schools that they go to, our older two, I should say, have never been within busing range because with selective enrollment, you don't have to live in the neighborhood, obviously.
Correct.
So for our oldest,
Up to 5 miles.
right, for our oldest, we drive 45 minutes typically to get her to school. Our second child, we're driving between 25, 35 minutes to get her to school. And yeah, we don't live within the busing range. So we didn't feel that as much as those people that were taking the bus prior to, but it is a huge inconvenience, a huge inconvenience.
Did geography ever play a decision? Did you ever consider pulling your child who was 45 minutes away closer?
We didn't at first because the school was working for her,
Okay.
right? And
And it was the best school when we tested. It was the #1 school.
Got it.
So
according to the ratings, yes.
and even though they don't do the ratings anymore for CPS, U.S. News and World Report has Skinner North as the top school in as far as CPS schools. So
No gifted centers are on that ranking.
No, and the
Yeah.
majority of CPS schools are
Majority
also
school.
not on there.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
several
so
schools not
it's-
in that just to.
it was something that I was surprised to see because Bronzeville is 6th on there.
I didn't think we were going to say all the names.
Oh, it's too late.
Okay.
It's too
Those
late.
rankings are inaccurate.
I'm Googleable. They can see where I.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's when it was a good fit. So I mentioned before the profile of the child. Our 5th grader wears her emotion on both sleeves. She needs a school that embraces her, that she can get familiar with. So testing her, moving her to a neighborhood school for our convenience, I would just feel like was robbing her.
Not a neighborhood school, but a school closer to our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And even for I think the main thing too is like for your convenience, how long? Because if you have like, it's that one saying like a parent is only as happy as their most unhappiest child.
Is
So
that a
it's-
saying?
Maybe.
Stop paying for therapy. They're never gonna be happy.
Yeah.
Just find the one that's least happy.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's
your,
the
that's
one-
the
yeah,
bar you're
that's
cleaning.
most unhappy. But I guess it's like
Interesting.
you would there's consequences like for your convenience, and it's gonna come back on you. Like I always tell this story, but my mom did not let me go to the art high school, and that's really where I wanted to go. And my mom still hears about it, and I'm in my 40s. Imagine like what you're gonna hear, what you'll have to deal. Like you think it's for your convenience, but is it?
Yeah.
Like that's the real question you got to think. Like, is it gonna be worth it?
When we found out our oldest got into the school that she attends now, and we knew how far it was,
18.3 miles.
we had that conversation, and he said, "Are you ready to make this commitment for the next,
8 years.
9
years?
Kindergarten.
Starting with kindergarten for the next 9 years." And at first, because we only had, the one kid going to school, we're like, yes, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And honestly, maybe he felt it sooner. I didn't really feel the severity of it until after our second daughter got into school, but then COVID was over and they both had to go to school.
I see.
Yeah.
In person. So when our second daughter got into a selective enrollment school, and it was a different one. It didn't matter because she was starting school remotely, and it wasn't until everybody was going back in person and we needed to figure out, okay, how are we gonna logistically make all of this work?
Yeah.
At that point, we had 3 drop-offs. One child at one school, second child at the second school, then the baby was going to her mother's house.
Oh,
And we had to go to work.
Right.
And then we had another baby.
Hey, why not?
congrats.
If it's good, if it feels good, it only get greater.
wow.
party going.
Usher didn't write a song about that one
Yet.
yet.
What would be the title of that song? Hey?
It's got to be piggybacking or something. That would be great. So that just feeling that, and this is before they're not heavy into any after school programs, sports, anything like that. This is just school, and us keeping our sanity in corporate America as working parents. We're like, yo, this is a lot.
And
Yeah.
it's a lot, but he also works remotely the majority of the time. He has to come into the office 1 day a week. I'm in the office 4 days a week. But even that 1 day a week for me gives me some flexibility. The days that he doesn't have to be in the office affords us a lot of flexibility that most parents might not have.
So if you can go back in a time machine, go back, 6, 7 years ago, what would you tell yourselves? And then Joe, I'll ask you the same. What would you tell yourself?
If it was 9 years,
He said 6, 7, but go ahead.
Whatever year you guys started the process.
The first kid.
The first kid. Yeah. So
you wouldn't be anything related to parenting, but there was this one contractor that we hired that just completely
Answer his question.
ruined our basement. I'm just like, yo, broski, come on. School-wise, I don't know that I'd do anything differently.
I was going to say the same.
The kids are excelling. The kids are happy. The kids are at the best school options for themselves. Our son just got accepted to our top choice for him. It's working. We don't get a lot of sleep, but it's working.
What would you tell yourself, Joy?
I think I would have purchased my home differently, just to be like fully transparent. I think if I didn't understand how, like, again, the big difference in the neighborhood schools and how much that plays a part, like, in your property value and all that. So I think I either would have purchased differently our home.
This one or the one before?
The one before, when Chance was like, like when Chance was like going for the schools, because it was really stressful with the selective enrollment. And if he wouldn't have got in, like, we were like gonna have to move. We had no neighborhood, we had no other options, and so I think that's would be my biggest change, like setting us up so it's like you have a plan B plus the bonus, you have higher property value because you have a good neighborhood school. I think that's what I would have did different.
Yeah, I think that's what I would. You took what I was going to say. You said the same thing. I think we would just had a different strategy. I think back then though the world was 5 days a week in the office, so I think that's
that's true.
Different dynamic, right? Because I think you always wanted to be in Beverly since you've been in Chicago. I was less like I can't do this commute
because that
every
commute
day.
Downtown is
correct.
Not pleasant.
Yeah, and then I didn't, But I think, the biggest thing was just like the real estate strategy. So I probably would have been more open to Beverly knowing we could have found a way to make it work, even though that 5 day, I never wanted to be a slave to the Metro schedule. And now here I am seeing Camille on the Metro trying to keep up with her walking.
And the red line.
And the red line. Red line. Red line makes a lot of sense when you're in the evening. In the morning, it can be tough. But I think, the real estate decisions you guys make, even whether you're as renters or as buyers, and this is not even a Chicago thing. This is everywhere. If you start looking at houses, you notice one of the first selling points, like in so and so school district. That goes a long way. I had people, and I think I got the horror stories of you were here. One kid would get into like a McDade, and the other kid tested into nothing. So we decided to move to Oak Park just so we didn't have to worry about this anymore.
I was going to bring up Oak Park was our.
That was the plan.
That was ours too.
The only thing is we hadn't had any of the children yet, and moving to Oak Park and paying those taxes before they could actually take advantage of it just didn't sit right on our soul. But once you start that school district,
but the CPS selective enrollment is like the highest ranked schools in the state. Like consistently, it's like better. So technically, trying to do selective enrollment is your best choice if that's what matters to you.
Yeah, and if you can juggle everything.
Yeah.
Another thing about the real estate, though, having your property within the boundary is not guaranteed year after year. They move the line.
That's true.
Absolutely.
So it's possible. There's people out there that purchased within the school district, but by the time it was time for their children to go there, moved to the other side of the block or a couple of blocks over. So imagine that family's like, yo, we paid up here. What
100%
over here? So that I never liked that aspect of it and the changing of the district lines. But it's something they do.
That's deep.
Do you think this is unfair? Like if your child doesn't test in, or just the system as a whole, like whether it's additional resources or I call it additional love being put into select enrollment schools, you think it's truly inequitable or
I look at a couple of different things. schools can be targeted and resources can be put there from the city, from the government, from the parents with a focused intent to increase that school. We have schools now that are top 10 ranked that weren't in the conversation when we were in high school. And when we moved here, Morgan Park High School, no Beverly resident wanted to send their kid there.
Absolutely.
They're underpopulated. They have to go outside of their district to fill the seats. The building is still present. Their sports teams are decent. They've had a decent run of principals, but parents do not see that as an option. I would love, by the time my 10 and 9-year-old are in high school, for that school to have had a turnaround where it's considerable and we don't have to look towards the downtown schools, the up north schools, for our children to get a good education. It takes a commitment from parents, from the community, from the city, and someone's got to be that guinea pig to say, we'll start populating those seats. I think that's possible. I've seen it happen with other turnaround schools, and they don't have to be rock bottom to do it. It just has to be a commitment from the parents to say, we want to do something about this school. Ideally, I'm an optimist. I think everything can be solved. I think everyone puts forth their effort and things can be better. It takes something to get things started. It takes parents to get it started. It takes the feeder schools to say, we're going to have a relationship with this school and say, we're going to send 3%, 10% of our students there and just see what happens. I believe things can turn around for a lot of neighborhood schools, elementary and high school, without a drastic wave of the pen from the mayor.
Got it. What about you, Camille?
Well, we have seen it happen. So I believe at the beginning of the podcast, you were talking about the selection of high schools are fewer now. But I actually think that there's more selective enrollment high school options now than when we were.
I was saying there's fewer high school options than elementary school options.
Oh, okay, okay.
There are more high schools now because we saw two of them rise while we were in high school.
Right, and some of those, as Ish was saying, were not the high schools that you wanted to go to, but now they're definitely top of the top and highly
they're
sought
not
after.
selective enrollment, they're college prep or they're medical prep, or there's some type of focus there where it's like, I like what they've done.
Got it. What's your take, Joy? In terms of it, is the whole selective enrollment process even fair?
Well, I mean, the answer is no. But I mean, for me, I'm the manager of STEM implementation and supports for CPS.
Watch your feet. See, title drops.
I have to help. I help implement STEM across the 48 STEM and STEAM schools in the district. Next year it'll be 51. I think there's a lot of schools that are hidden gems that people just don't know about. And there's so much focus on a selective enrollment that you're actually missing out on like a school that's really going to give your kid like those 21st century skills. So I think if I was thinking about it differently, I do think there's a possibility for a school to turn around 100% just with like a strong program, because in my role, I make sure that when they have a program and it's implemented, just having like one person or one team outside of the school who's like helping with that can make a difference. It can just make a school turn around, and it can make it more equitable, because all of my STEM and STEAM schools, they're neighborhood schools. They're not, there's like one or two that's magnet, that's it. And they're like high performing schools. Like the kids they're in the makerspace, they 3D printing, they're vinyl cutting, they know how to use computers, they know how to make t-shirts. I mean, it's like, it's possible. It really is. It's just the district does have to take some ownership, because right now, in my opinion, it's more of, well, it's a school. But no, it's like if the district even takes a little more accountability for some of these schools, because it's not fair that there's no neighborhood options. It's just not, to me, it's not right. It's unjust. It's not even like, it's just unjust. So if someone's paying so much for their home, they should have a school, because they had that on the north side. It just doesn't make sense to me.
But even to that point, you shouldn't have to pay a ton for your home in order for your kids to have a good education.
That's true. Yeah, it's like
that too.
Or be the only black family on the block because you're like striving for that. I think you shouldn't have to play that game. I think, we're all like on the, I guess, inside looking out, since it sounds like all of our kids, well, you got one more unless you guys have another. No. Or do you or Ish, there's an announcement Camille wanted to make on the podcast today, actually.
I talked to her OB, and there will be no announcement.
At a personal meeting.
No, but I think it's, to Joy's point, it's, just the whole idea of having to go through all of this. Like, yeah. I don't know the exact miles BCS is from our home, but just like that commute 13 miles, like every day, like having my daughter having to sit in that car both ways each day. I'm like, this sucks, because it's like she's tired. Like she could be doing something else than this. Let's say if we split it, this extra 45 minutes a day that she's just sitting in a car or having Uncle Netflix watch her while I drive.
It's pretty much like extracurriculars are kind of out the door.
They're kind of out the door because you're like, yeah.
Stuck with what's going on at the school,
yeah. And I think, like, for me, I think it's an overall, part of it, I think it's an overall marketing problem. Like, how do you, to Joy's point, like, ever since she's taken this role, she raves every day about what these schools are doing, and how she would even consider pulling our kids out to go to some of these schools because just they're doing so many dynamic things. Yes. We haven't received an offer from any of them, so it's part.
I was going to say, with them being neighborhood schools, can you attend them outside of?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So part of the,
do like your mom did.
Yeah, part of
any take this math test in front of them.
Yeah. She wrote the problem on the board. He can figure out any problem. You notice how, my mom led the science department. I was like, how did she get to the head of the math department?
She dropped the test on the give them that test.
Yeah, pick any one of this one.
Oh, what if my whole life is a lie?
Yeah. But no, I think what happens is, right, we all know, like, you can pick, 6 selective enrollment schools when you take the exam, and then 20, they call them choice schools, but those are your neighborhood schools. So, of them, the irony was we were looking at schools and neighborhoods. We were looking in Pill Hill because the Earharts and the Robert A. Black seemed appealing to us. I think what kills a lot of them is the after school. Like, there's no after school. So if you work a 9 to 5,
you got to be gone at like 2:45.
Yeah, so they don't become viable options for that. Right. So I think that's a disparity right there for the working parent, right? To some of these schools. I think the other part is, like, how do you just create those on-ramps and those beacons, or how do you create the bus service if you really want? I'm using Earhart as an example because Joy raves about that school, but if you wanted your kids to go there, all right, like, how are you going to get there? And that becomes the same detriment to some of these selective enrollment schools. So as a whole, I think the process is unfair, but I think if CPS did a better job elevating some of these other schools and creating some type of rating to make those schools seem a little bit more shiny, I think it could go a long way.
And it would make the selective enrollment schools better.
Question, so with you being within CPS, I've heard comments that suburban schools work because the districts are smaller, and that CPS, just the number of facilities that it's got to manage, numbers of networks within, it's just not possible to have one oversight committee handle so many different areas. Do you find that it's a numbers thing?
I don't know. I think it's that's a hard question, because it is a lot of schools. I will say that, but I think there just needs to be. I don't think it's in the numbers thing. I think it's just like intentions, and that people, if more parents probably spoke up and were upset and adamant, because somebody's speaking up about that there's no neighborhood schools, because that's why it's this whole thing about we're going to shut down selective enrollment schools.
It's the CTU.
But I don't.
It's the union.
Somebody
they
is
want
doing
more
it.
Jobs for their
But
base.
I think that there's room to have, if you just have one more additional person of oversight, it just makes a difference. I'm a team of, it's me and it's 3 people on my team, and we're implementing across 48 schools, and it makes a difference. Like, it just is like one more out. Like, most of the schools with programs are the ones that, because technically gifted and classical is a program. It's, yes, they are testing in, but that is a program that school has to, like, implement. So I feel like if you kind of more put that at more schools intentionally placed, it would make a difference.
Mm-hmm. So we're coming up on time. So Ish and Camille, we like to end every show with a little segment called Things We Wish We Would Have Known. Something germane to the topic of the day.
So stay on point.
Yeah, no, just to be, but I know I asked a question. What advice would you give yourself? But that was relevant then. But always talk about something we wish we would have known. So I'll go first. I think one thing I wish I would have known is, even though I didn't appreciate it, like how much time and effort my parents put into choosing schools for me. I grew up in uptown up north. Went to private school my whole life until I got to Whitney Young, and a lot of that in hindsight was because of the gang stuff going on back then. Like in the 90s, it's funny, like we talk about crime and how Chicago just, broke a new record or has not hit a new record. A lot of the records were set in the 90s when we were like in elementary school or school age, right? I wish I would have known like how much, even though I didn't appreciate it then because I only 6 people in my 8th grade class, how much effort they put into like putting me in a place where I could be here right now, paying for studio time to do a podcast with people like y'all. So wish I would have known like my parents did put in that work, even if I didn't appreciate it necessarily.
Do you want to go?
I'm going to talk about yours.
I wish I would have known that what we do very, very, very early on sets the tone for the children. As we've had subsequent children, I know you're not supposed to compare, but I look at, okay, well, this child knew, all of her letters by this point, or well, this child was talking already, or this child was really good with numbers or shapes. And as you get more kids, it's harder to give that individualized focus. So it's for me, I wish I would have known how difficult it is to make sure you give all that same individualized attention to the first child as you have the last child.
Oh, man. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And all of this change that's going on, COVID, starting a business, raising the extra kids, going for 2 more during COVID, it's possible. It's not too late.
One was pre-COVID, one was post-COVID. We did not actually have any children during COVID.
I was able to pull off a lot of this personally because I went to my employer and I asked for more responsibility and to get a promotion. I wish I knew early on that I controlled my destiny from my job the same way I control my enrollment at the schools and involvement as a parent and all of these different just empowered positions that I've got as a parent volunteer. I took my profession as like, I'm stuck in this spot because no one's going to pull me up. Mm-hmm. So in the midst of all of this, I talked myself into a promotion. I talked myself into more responsibility, into a director position. And that's allowed me the freedom to do a lot of the things that I do outside of work. So I wish, as I was focusing on building the family, on making sure the home front was good, building the business, that I put an earlier emphasis on getting into a better position at work. Because instead of being a 41-year-old director, I could have been 35-year-old director and possibly had more flexibility pre-COVID. So
this
that
is a whole episode right here you're dropping.
It's an executive director position that I'm looking at right now. So it's just where I focused my attention. I feel like I went hard for my family. I went hard for a lot of things in my community. And work was just kind of like, work will be there. And that's just a hindsight thing that I see.
Whew, follow that one, Joy.
I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, man, how you, man. Well, what I was going to say, what I wish I would have known was just like, there is an option out there for you. When Chance was a kid, it did, well, I mean, he's still a kid, but when he was testing and stuff, because of the voices around me and everything that I was hearing, I wasn't certain if there were other options for him. But now in my current role, I can see there's so many options for people out here. And it's not a negative thing per se. If your child didn't test in, there's not necessarily something like wrong with your kid. Like, it's like, that might not have been the best choice for them. There's like a lot of options out here for kids if you are willing to like expand what you like. Again, look at the data. I'm always gonna say, go to the data, because if you looking at the data, it's not like all top 10 schools are selective enrollment, because they not. And you could just open up your eyes to like other types of schools that aren't your kid didn't test in, but it's like the best fit for your child. So I think that's the thing I wish I would have known, because I was stressed out. Like, I was really stressed out, anxious. I was trying not to like force my kid to practice test questions, like be super hard on them for the test, because our whole livelihood depended on that test. And I just don't think that's a fair system. It's like, there are options out here beyond the test. You just have to find them.
Man.
And you don't have to stay, the child doesn't have to stay at the same school.
Right, yeah.
You can always move your child.
Yeah, you can always move your child. It's okay. Yeah. And sometimes you can go back. It's okay.
There's no permanence. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our episode 44. Ain't Gonna Hurt Nobody podcast, and we out.
All right.